later too. We'll have. I always still want to do that fun episode of us just talking about crazy stuff, kind of like that first episode that you did of the Minds Panel show about like consciousness and. Actually, I want to do an Infinite Imaginarium show just about
That
like
would be great.
creativity
Yeah, I
and
mean, I've been my views on all that are definitely evolving. I've been listening to a lot more, and this isn't to say that I agree with their worldview completely, but a lot more like Sam Harris and Rich and Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and those kinds of people. I think it's really important to balance. They have really good things to say about free speech, which is sort of why I dug into them more. But the debates that they have with people like Deepak Chopra are just really interesting. And I don't know, no one can necessarily answer the question, the consciousness question, and that's sort of the beauty of it. But um, yeah, I definitely recommend they call them the Four Horsemen: Hitchens, Harris, Dawkins, and Dennett, I think. Sometimes they piss me off, but they also have really insightful things to say.
yeah, I too. I remember seeing a lecture or some discussion that Sam Harris and Deepak Chopra had, and then Deepak Chopra kind of got pissed. But I kind of like and me too. And this is just me going off a little bit on a tangent, but I'm kind of of the school of thought of Robert Anton Wilson. You know, I don't have any beliefs, but I have suspicions. So you know, and I think too, what helps support those suspicions is if you get the alternative or the opposite view, and then it could either strengthen it or grow it. That's kind of like this kind of like tension between the polar opposites, and it's I always find it interesting too when something makes me uh, defensive or squirmy. Then I kind of look like, okay, why am I getting so defensive on like, is this challenging some kind of um, unconscious bias or belief that I have to entertain different ideas and not get that being defensive about certain things. And this is kind of happens. The art of trolling is it kind of hopefully could wake up somebody that is in like a thought bubble, and you can't even know what kind of thought bubble you're in until you get until it gets popped, and the way you react towards it is either you kind of shrink back in or you kind of expand and grow a little bit, and that's always kind of this challenge for me on a continuous basis, and I always love kind of like entertaining that stuff.
Yeah, I think that that principle of sort of forcing yourself to confront uh, unfamiliar, dangerous ideas is huge. I mean, there's this guy Jordan Peterson who I've been watching a bunch of his stuff today. He's a professor at I think the University of Toronto, who is like a huge free speech advocate, and he's under a lot of fire right now because and I'm sure you've seen with a lot of the new users, there's sort of they would call themselves anti-SJWs. So you have this movement, this growing movement of people, SJWs, social justice warriors, who sort of are trying to police language and under some sort of umbrella of like of social justice, but at the end of the day they are trying to police language. And what Jordan Peterson's point is that free speech is the mechanism for creating useful discourse and for evolving society. And the only real limitations, that there are certain limitations on free speech that make sense, like you don't yell fire in a crowded theater because that has significant negative social impact and can even be harmful to people. But when you start picking words that and making certain words illegal, it's sort of a never-ending rabbit hole that you just keep falling down. And so that's one of the things that I just find refreshing about being on Minds is like just constantly seeing stuff that I don't agree with, and but it's also very crazy territory to walk because, you know, I don't know, the whole censorship issue is very difficult because you can attack it from two ways, human or algorithmic. And if you see how YouTube and Facebook are responding algorithmically, like that's asking for all sorts of problems, because then the robots are going to be wrong, and they're, you know, you need context. Like when, you know, someone could be being sarcastic, or they could, you know, an algorithm can't detect sarcasm, and it can't really detect comedy. So, you know, just because the word is in there means it's wrong. But then, you know, humans are full of bias too, and it's just really interesting seeing, you know, the diversity of people that are coming on the platform, and some people are extremely offensive, and but, you know, that's okay. But the question is, and, you know, I don't expect an answer to this, I certainly don't have one, but where do you draw the lines? You know, what is acceptable free speech, and what are those few things that are not acceptable? So just sort of something to think about.
Yeah, those are probably the most interesting threads that recently been happening about that whole issue of free speech, and these different things that have been going on too. I've been kind of on the sidelines following it, and it's you know, that whole thing where you're talking about comedy and sarcasm, and I think for me personally, that's what I find the best way to handle to dealing with these kind of like on the line topics is with humor. And you get, you know, for me, a lot of times I don't care about personal stuff or any of that kind of stuff. And for me, using language, and I'm always trying to hopefully evolve the way I use it and evolve the way I think. Is it going to be productive or counterproductive to my goals of how I want to communicate? You know, a lot of stuff that I see, and I understand the anti-SJWs, and I think too what the SJWs are doing with this kind of policing the language, it's being counterproductive. It's not doing their intention, and is actually creating, you know, this is a lot of stuff. What's the problem with legislating morality? You know, you put these laws into effect, and even with the algorithms, and they have the opposite of desired attention of what it is. You know,
that's exactly right. Yeah. Like when you ban something, it pushes it. It actually empowers it. So yeah, even though on a shallow level it seems like you're getting rid of the problem, you're giving it that power. You're pushing it into the underground. You're giving people more of a reason to get angry. I mean, for instance, say you have like a hardcore racist, you know, the typical thing to do is delete the racist content. Obviously that is necessary sometimes, but if you let it stay there and you let discourse take its course, then, you know, you would imagine that actually leaving it there is the greatest punishment to the racist, because then they're forced to face what they did. Because eventually, over time, as long as rational discourse is occurring, you know, they will be convinced, you know, not always, but they will be convinced that they're wrong. And then that'll just be sitting there to haunt them. Like just this totally embarrassing, ridiculous thing. But I don't know. Everything is depends on very specific use case or just specific cases, and so there's not really a golden rule for it.
Yeah, there's no magic bullet, and it kind of goes from case by case. But yeah, that's always something interesting. Is Ghost Spider still here?
Oh yeah, no, I was just waiting. Actually, I don't mean to push this exact topic a lot further, but sadly, I think the best representation of this And anti-social justice warriors are sort of pushed to the point where they're literally self-identifying as shit posters and trying to post, quote, cringe-worthy content. So it really is to that point where you tell someone they can't do something and they go to the furthest extreme. But South Park really captures it in their most recent season, in that they were trying to explain what real trolling is. And he was saying that real trolling is coming to troll someone in a way that the people that come to their defense are so annoying and self-righteous that it gets the entire internet to go and troll those people because they hate them more than the original topic or whatever. So the fact that these so-called social justice warriors come to the aid of whatever cause in such a self-righteous way, they're trying to be a good person with some sort of morality and say, you can't do this or that thing because it hurts this person. Well, the rest of the internet sees that and they say, well, you can't tell me what to do. You can't tell me I can't say that. You can't tell me who I can't hurt. I'm going to say that 10 times more, and I'm going to hurt 10 times more people to show you that, I can do what I want. And so it really does promote that sort of thing where that's really becoming troll culture, is saying things in a way that are people on the bandwagon so that you can just sort of sit back and enjoy. And it sort of all gets into people doing things for their own enjoyment. And so a lot of times when I see that, it's sort of, what's your intent? What are you here to do? What are your goals of how you're trying to communicate? Like you're trying to do it in a, quote, cringe-worthy way. So I don't really see much anything constructive coming from it. And I guess it's a really big thing beyond the SJWs to not allow hesitation to perpetuate stagnation, and everyone just sort of needs to work for what they believe in rather than what's popular or bandwagoning towards something else, and to be a lot more genuine. And if you're going to interact, you're running out of time. You only have a certain amount of time, and you just need to sort of make these actions, make your choices now, and stop really lollygagging around and bullshitting, stop trolling. Like if you're really going to get something done, you're going to get something done in an efficient way. If you're not about the efficiency, you're not really trying to complete anything.
There's definitely a distinction, though. I agree with everything you just said. There is a distinction between shit posters, trolls, and like anti-SJWs. I think the labels get a little bit nauseating, but I mean, I don't think that everyone who's an anti-SJW is shit posting. I mean, that gets into the territory of yelling fire in a crowded theater. I mean, those are just like troll. I mean, they're trying to incite chaos. And, I think that there's always, it's actually mischief night tonight. There is a place for that. But there's also a big distinction between shit posters and generally people who don't agree with SJWs. I mean, I think that they will soon realize that, like you said, they're fighting against themselves, and that by trying to enact legislation that actually forces people to use language in a certain way, that they're hurting themselves, because the blowback effect is going to come in full force and in ways that they can't even understand.
Yeah, and the same thing with the opposite side of the extreme SJWs is the shit posters, right? They're kind of reconfirming or to the SJWs says we need to do this legislation, and they're kind of giving them the proof of that. Look at what they're doing, and this and that is creating chaos, and people are blah blah blah. And it's kind of funny though, the way I feel, the way if you don't like something or whatever, fighting fire with fire doesn't work. Fighting fire with water works. And also too, there's a certain thing of your attention, and this is kind of what Gus Spiders is saying. If you don't like something, just don't give it your attention, and then there's that simple phrase that don't feed the trolls. And I think a lot of reasons why on my channel I'm a little bit free of just blind. I hate labels too, but just for the sake of communicating and talking, people trolling my comment threads is because I generally don't feed the trolls, but sometimes I too get stuck because I want to be right, or I want to, or something really bugs me, and I feel I go a little too far with it, and I create that, and I think, oh my god, I always get mad at myself and not necessarily the troll. I was like, why did I, that old, I forgot who said this. I think it was like Mark Twain. Don't argue with an idiot because they'll beat you with experience, type of thing. And so, those are always lessons I have to relearn and confirm within my own way.
Yeah, and then you see a great defense against them too is to actually share their nonsense. So a lot of times on Twitter, you'll see, when public figures get trolled really hard, they'll retweet the trolling just because it's so obvious how stupid these people are that to expose that, they're going to get that heat for what they did. So